Welcome back to another Victory Haven podcast. We have had heavy hearts for quite a while. And I just woke up yesterday with an extremely heavy heart that followed me throughout the day. And so I just felt the need to get on and talk about it. And I know a lot of people really do not want to go into the deep emotional issues that we deal with. And this isn't for everyone. And I'm okay with that. But for those of you who have ears to hear, I really appreciate your following through and listening to what is on my heart today. And what I've asked Yahweh to speak through me, because I definitely do not want this to be my agenda. We've had things happen throughout our lives that bring heavy hearts. And it just really compounded on me yesterday morning and walked with me through the day. In fact, Sunday night, I had a very hard time sleeping because of it. And there were several things going on, and I'm not going to talk about all of them. But, and I really don't need to talk about all of them, and some of them I don't really have the freedom to talk about right now. But I just wanted to get on and share. You know, Tim and I pretty much could say that we were born in the church, because we were both born into Christian families. Both of our dads served on the deacon committee, the search committees for new pastors, just a lot of various things. My dad sung, my mother sung in the choir, I sang in the choir. So, you know, both of us were, and I'm going to put this on airplane mode so that I don't get a whole bunch of ding ding dings. But anyway, maybe I'll put it on quiet too. But anyway, so both of us have been in the church all of our lives, and we've both served a lot, and we've learned over the years. In fact, when we were stationed in Germany, I don't know how many of you remember Steve Green. Was a very popular Christian singer at the time, and some of his music really spoke to me. You know, the one song that specifically that comes to my mind right now, he had a song that said, "Don't let another wounded soldier die." And you know, those who have been in the military, and I grew up, my dad was in the Air Force during Vietnam, and then Tim was in the Air Force and the Army during Desert Storm and Desert Shield, and so we have a lot of experience with the military and how how they have a pact. Don't leave your brother behind. If your brother is wounded, pick him up and bring him with you. Don't leave him behind. And we deal with that in that way in the military. But it seems like when we get to church, that we just really, hang on a minute, my computer locked up, my screen locked up. Okay, I'm back. So anyway, like I say, with the military, you know, we have a saying, if your brother is wounded, don't leave him behind. Pick him up and take him to safety. It should be that way in the church. We're told over and over again, Galatians 6:2 and 1 Thessalonians 5:11 tells us that we're supposed to bear each other's burdens and build each other up, not tear each other down. And that when one member suffers, we all suffer. When one is esteemed or built up or honored, that we're to rejoice with them. We're to mourn together and we're to rejoice together. Unfortunately, that's not been the experience that we have had. Now, I'll tell you that, and I'm trying not to be all over the place, okay? I apologize for this. I've just got so many things, and I did make some notes so that I could keep on track as much as possible. But, you know, I am a very small person, and I've always been small. And that has brought along challenges of its own. Not being chosen for a team like at recess and having to have the teacher put me on a team by default because my peers just looked at me and looked at my size and assumed that I couldn't do anything and that I wasn't going to be good enough for their team. So I got put on teams by default. I've had people assume that I don't understand what they are going through, but yet they have not taken the time to understand my story. And we recently had some things. We were accused of something without the person really knowing. They just assumed. And that's happened several times. While Tim was in the military, we got stationed at one location, and the neighborhood, you know, our daughter was young at the time and she wanted to play with neighborhood children, but it took us a good year for the neighbors to be even willing to speak to us. And one neighbor told us it was because they assumed just by looking at us that we were either the chaplain's family, which they didn't want to get involved with, or we were CID, which is Criminal Investigation Division, and we were neither. Tim was in artillery. He was neither of those. And those have not been the only things that have happened. And it deeply saddens me. And you know, about 8 years ago, going 9 years, well, between 8 and 9 years ago, I went through an extreme emotional trauma that really sent me down a downward spiral, and has been very difficult for me to heal from. And I'm not going to go into all of that, but it did initiate in the church that we had been attending for 17 years, and I had been passionately involved in and was passionately promoting and thinking that it was the best thing ever and that it was a good example of what heaven is going to look like. And I was always telling new people in the area, you've got to come here, you've got to come here, you've got to come here. I was involved in the choir. I was involved in some of the drama events that happened, and I even went on 3 short-term mission trips, all the while enduring bullying. And I tell people now, I say, when children bully, it's because they learn it from the adults. And that adults are the biggest bullies. And I honestly have to say that I personally have not bullied because I understand what it feels like on the receiving end, but I'm not exempt from looking at somebody and making a judgment, which, in my opinion, can be just as bad as bullying. And I have had to apologize for that, not only to the person, but also to Yahweh, and admit that I was wrong. And, the journey that I have been on has given me a lot of compassion. And I can pretty much tell, I'm pretty perceptive. And I can pretty much see a person and see that they are very heavy-hearted. They're not always, they're not always honest with me, and aren't always willing to divulge that they are going through a hard time. But I am pretty perceptive of it because of what I have gone through. And so I just want to share some of what's been on my heart over the last 48 hours. And I've really I've recently begun listening to a podcast that is really helping me walk through some of what I've gone through. And this podcast has helped me to understand that I have had a lot of Lazarus moments. And Lazarus was the brother of Mary and Martha in the Bible. And he died and was buried, and he was a very good friend of Jesus. And Jesus was very sad when he heard that Lazarus had died, because Jesus was here on the earth in human form so that he could experience what we go through and feel our emotions and just understand what it was like to be human. So he did here. And he, I think that even in his spiritual form that he's in now, that I believe that he still has feelings, because we're told that we were designed because Yahweh was lonely and wanted interaction with us. So I've had some Lazarus moments, and we think of that as the body completely dying, and we're put in a coffin and put 6 feet under. And but I'm learning that that can be our spiritual being as well. And when things happen to us, like what happened to me about 8 or 9 years ago, that sent me down that emotional spiral, part of that was after 23 years of being in the same place, the first time in my whole life, because like I say, I grew up military, and my husband's retired military, and I was married to him his whole 22 years. And moving around, I got used to it, and I was able to adapt to my new surroundings. But 8 years ago, this uprooting after 23 years where I was very connected in the community and very involved in the community and very well known, I uprooted. Oh, and I left behind my dream house where I hosted a weekly wellness group for at least three years in my home on a weekly basis, and it was very healing to me. And I leave that, and I'm the new kid on the block, dealing with this emotional trauma and this upheaval, and trying to find my place in this new community, which, like I say, I was used to being in the military for as long as I was in it. I was used to that, but this time was extremely different. And quarantine happened during that time and did not help matters either. And when Jesus arrived at Lazarus's grave, at the tomb where he was, and called for Lazarus to come forth, and Lazarus came forth, what was Lazarus dressed in? He was mummified. He had these grave clothes wrapped around him tightly, which was what they did at that time. And what Jesus did was he told the community to unravel the grave clothes and let Lazarus be free. That was a way of saying that we need community and that Lazarus needed the community's help to be freed from the grave clothes. And that a lot of times we are buried alive by the people around us who should be helping us, but instead they're pounding us further and further deeper into the ground. And so this has been concerning to me. And let me see here. There's a time to mourn and there's a time to dance. And one of the things that was said to me, I've had several things spoken over me. One of them was, let me back up a little bit. Some of the things that I have gone through that most people are unaware of is that when I was 2 years old, my mother got pregnant with my sister Sharon. And I don't know all the story around Sharon's short life, but Sharon only lived for 22 months. And I was 4 years old when she died and when her funeral happened. And the thought process at that time was that a child my age, which, like I say, I was 4 years old, could not handle a funeral. So I was put in the nursery with my mom's sister during the whole thing, which means I didn't get any closure. And at that time, Sharon was the only sibling that I had. And I feel like we were close. That's my feeling. I just feel like that's what it was. And I hated my aunt for a little while, but I have gotten over that. But I do remember too that after the funeral, I went home as a 4-year-old, 4.5-year-old. I went home wishing I was dead because I wanted to be with my sister, and wishing I was dead and just falling back on my bed wishing I was dead. And throughout my life, I have looked up to heaven waiting for the clouds to open and for Jesus to come and take me up to my sister. Now I do, and I don't remember really talking about Sharon after that. We did go visit her gravesite a couple of times when we were in the area, but and I don't remember pictures of her even as I was growing up. And since I have become an adult and wrote my autobiography, I started doing some research and actually got a picture of me at her gravesite, and it's included in my autobiography, which my autobiography is on Amazon. And so there's been a little more discussion, and I have gotten more pictures of her, but it has still not healed the wound of the questions I had surrounding her death and even her short life. I was told one story. Well, I thought I was told one story, and that's what I believed for a very long time. And then the story got changed several years ago, and then it has kind of changed a little bit again, so I'm not 100% sure what that story is. I just know that I have struggled with closure all my life because of that. And so, that has been a way of a Lazarus moment, and nobody to really help me unravel the grave clothes that held me tight. I'm starting to do some of that. Starting to learn some of that. Talking about my sister has been very beneficial, very helpful. But anyways, that was a time to mourn. And mourning is the winter that prepares us for the spring. I am not a winter person, and I am so looking forward to spring and summer. To me, winter represents death, and I cannot stand the cold. And spring is when new life begins, and I absolutely look forward to that. But I've had other Lazarus moments, like I was starting to say before. I am a 2-time cancer survivor, celebrating 26 years since the last diagnosis. I don't know how many of you actually know that. And I have had people diagnosed who tell me, oh, you can't understand what I go through. Oh, yeah, I can. And the thing is that both times I refused chemo and radiation. And I was given a 5-year death sentence. It was spoken over me by the surgeon. Yahweh had other plans, and I'm grateful for that. And part of that is sharing my story and how I understand. Now, something that I tell people is that I do have a big scar right here. I did have a mastectomy against my better judgment, but I was dealing with something else and was in so much pain that I thought, well, and the doctors were more concerned about what was going on here than what was going on in the other area that I was dealing with, and was the reason I had actually gone to them for. So they were more concerned about the tumor that was here. And so I agreed, yes, I agreed, even though my gut was telling me it wasn't necessary. I agreed to a mastectomy. which honestly has brought about other issues that I speak about. Not everybody's open to it, but there are lots of issues, and I feel it on a moment by moment basis what happened there. There are lymphatic issues, there are nerves that were clipped because they were in the way. And so, I have to be careful what I eat because this can be, the lymphatics can really be swollen up by congestion. So I have to be very careful with that. Not everybody's open to that. I have to do hard things that a lot of people just are not open to. And it's not taught by the mainstream, and so I'm looked at as radical, and I have been called radical, and people have closed their ears. They've not had ears to hear because I'm outside the box, I'm outside the mainstream. But this is the journey that Yahweh had for me. And I tell people, you know what? Because of the mastectomy, I now understand what other women have gone through and what they deal with. And I believe that I can talk to them on a more understanding, a more compassionate level. But most of these people that are throwing judgments at Tim and I have not taken the time. They have not walked in our shoes. They have not walked in our shoes. And they're just making judgments out of their heads and not out of compassion in their heart. And that really bothers me. And like I say, I've dealt with it all my life. All my life. Because of my size and just a lot of different things. I do say that, during quarantine, I have a message to speak. And I was so used to, in my last location where I was at for 23 years, I was used to at least once a month being able to show up at places and share my story. And I have a food display that shows the, what is it now, 17 or 18-year-old McDonald's hamburger and fries that still looks like it did the day I bought it 18 years ago or whatever it is. And I do have the Chick-fil-A chicken sandwiches that were bought about 9 or 10 years ago. And they have not did what they should have done. And you know what? The bugs don't even want them. A couple of years ago, we took a trip. And when we got to our destination, and I had the food display with us because it's something that I carry with me just in case I have an opportunity. And we found, when we got to our destination, we found what I call a hitchhiker mouse. And you go, what's a hitchhiker mouse? Well, let me tell you. A mouse, a field mouse, jumped into our vehicle and traveled the 2 or 3 days with us on our journey. And we found it because we had stopped at a smoothie place and gotten a smoothie. And one of us, either Tim or I, had left the remainders of our smoothie still in the cup on the door, in the cup holder on the door. And we got up one morning and found this mouse was thirsty and it went in there, and we saw other evidence that it was traveling with us. And so I even have a picture. I may post it with this video. But anyway, yes, we did release the mouse into a field at our location, our destination. We did not harm it. But you know the interesting thing, that mouse had the opportunity to eat the food display. It did not want any of that crap. And if you don't like that word of crap, that's on you. But it did not want any of that food look-alike, food wannabes, chemical experiments. It did not want it at all. That tells you something. And you know, 8 years ago, when we uprooted after 23 years, we ended up camping in our camper for 9 weeks straight because we were in between houses. Our last house, which was my dream house, sold within the second or third showing. And the house that we're now in, the people knew for 2 years that they wanted to move, but they hadn't started looking in the location that they wanted to move to. And so they asked us for the 9 weeks so that they could get everything prepared and they could find a new place in their new location. So thankfully, we had the camper, which was very much outfitted and a very, very, very nice, comfortable place to stay for the 9 weeks. But we didn't have a place to keep the food display, so it stayed in my car, in the back seat or the back part of my car. And the ants didn't even want them. They didn't even climb the car to come and get them. That tells you something about the fast food places, and actually a lot of the foods that are being offered right now. But anyways, so journaling became very healing for me. And I do admit that I was dealing with a lot of trauma. I was trying to heal without any community to help me unravel the grave clothes. And some of my journaling reflects that. And if I blogged it, and if you want to read some of what I was dealing with, and especially during quarantine, I was really struggling internally, and journaling and blogging was a way for me to work through what was happening in here and share. I mean, it's part of the healing process. And like I say, some of it was really showed that I was bleeding. I was bleeding bad and crying out for help. But and like I was starting to say, if you want to read some of it, you can find it through our website, victoryhaven.org, and there's a tab that says Naomi's blogging. Anyway, you can read through some of that. I'm not doing any of that right now. The podcasts are more of where I'm at right now. But anyways, if you want to read through that, that's up to you. Jesus wept. And he even sweat drops of blood when he was in the garden praying just before his crucifixion. And he also got frustrated with the disciples who he had asked to accompany him and to pray with him for 1 hour. And what did they do? And he was frustrated with them. And he asked them, why couldn't you stay awake for just 1 hour? And that's some of what I have felt. Now, it has given me compassion, and like I say, it has helped me to understand people and what they are going through, whether they want to verbalize it or not. I see body language. I see facial expressions. I hear their conversations, and I can tell it. Healing is personal, but we were never meant to do it alone. But how many of us, like Steve Green says, don't leave a wounded soldier, don't let another wounded soldier die? You know how hard it was during quarantine for people who ended up in the hospital during that time, and were not allowed visitors, people in nursing homes were not allowed the contact with their family members. They had to look at them through a window. How did you feel during that time with not being able to be with your tribe, not being able to give somebody a hug, not being able to be with those you love who were somewhere else and you were not allowed to go see them, go visit them? How did you feel? Well, you know, a lot of times that's what some of us are going through. And you know, grief means that something mattered deeply. And like I say, I have gone through several griefs. I haven't mentioned all of them, but I've mentioned at least 2 of them that mattered deeply. Now, the second one, I have come to learn that I had put people on too high of a pedestal and made them more of a god than what they should have been. And so I have had to apologize for that, and I have forgiven them for my own sake, because the body does keep the score. And when we have those feelings, it does get into our cells, and it does disrupt digestion, it does disrupt all kinds of things. It can be a cause of cancer. It can be a triggering factor to diabetes. It can be a triggering factor for a lot of health issues, which is one reason why when people want a protocol to follow for health issues, I cannot give them step by step, just generic step by step. I need to know what their diet is like, what traumas they have dealt with. I need to know a whole gamut of things. What medications are they on? What supplements or other natural healing protocols have they tried? And you know, a lot of times the natural things, quote unquote, fail because people try to do it alone and they don't go into the emotional part. That's a very hard part to do. And I know I struggle with that sometimes too. I have generational traumas, generational curses. We all do. We all do. Even the Bible talks about how the sins of the father are passed down from generation to generation. And so, people have asked us, well, how come you don't just give out information when people ask you for help? And it's exactly what I said. It takes time. Dis-ease takes time. That cancer actually takes 8 to 12 years for it to be even diagnosed. And we are all born with cancer cells. Some of them activate and some of them don't. And so that is part of what I do, is I go in and say, why did yours activate? Why did mine activate twice? And so let me see here. What else I've got here? Something about Esther. Esther in the Bible. She was born a Jew, and her uncle was raising her because she was an orphan, and she got chosen to be in the king's court and to become the next queen. And during that time period, she found out about a plot to kill her entire nation, all of the Israelites. And it was a plot by somebody that was very close to the king. Well, similar to what I do as a health coach and working with people, Esther didn't go in and just conquer. She prepared, and she made a plan, and she took steps to where she could help the king to understand what was going on. And that's similar to the steps that I take with clients on helping them through their health journeys. So just in case you're asking, how come you charge and how come you have a private membership, it's because of these things. And like I say, I've experienced grief and I have compassion. Before we made this transition 8 years ago, we did have a weekly wellness group in our home that we hosted in our home. And it was a support system for not only me, but for other people. And we had somebody dealing with ALS. And she had been told that the groups that she tried to join didn't want her because she was following too healthy of a regimen, because she was working with ALS naturally and eating a lot like I do. Anyways, she was told that she really didn't have a support system because people were refusing. She was going through a lot of what I was going through, bullying for those who call themselves Christians, but I'm learning that they're actually Jezebels. So she was going through that, and her husband was a chaplain in the military. So they came on a weekly basis, and we were a support system for that. And part of our private member foundation, part of our membership is being able to be involved in a weekly support group for those who are not finding support from the community and those around us. And it's there are more of us going through that than what a lot of you might understand. And so we offer it. We would love to have it be in person, but it's not always possible, so we do offer it virtually. And you can find out about that on our website, victoryhaven.org. But anyway, so Esther did not conquer. She had that step-by-step plan that was able to help her have victory when she finally got to speak to the king, and he understood what was going on and the importance of it and the actions that needed to be done. Um, like I say, some people feel like I don't understand. And here's some things. Like I say, not only my sister Sharon's short life and her funeral, I completely understand the lack of closure there. I grew up with feeling the calling to be a nurse. Now, Yahweh had a different plan for that, and that's part of where my 2 cancer diagnoses came in. And I'm now a naturopathic practitioner, health coach, and I'm so much happier in that arena than I would have been in the allopathic, because I've learned so much and experienced so much on my own that I know that I would not have been happy there, and I've always leaned more towards the natural anyway. Call me a tree hugger if you want, but I've always leaned more towards that. My dad, when I was about 12 years old, no, about 10 years old, we almost lost him to a bleeding ulcer. He almost waited too long to go to the doctors. And that is one of the times, we don't need to be going to the doctors for every little sniffle, but that's the common practice nowadays. But one of the times that is really necessary is like when my dad, we almost lost him to a bleeding ulcer. And I'm thankful that the doctors were there to help him with that. And like I say, I was about 10 years old when that happened, and he's still with us. He's 90 years old now, and I am so thankful that he's still with us. 12 years ago, he had a major stroke, and we were told that he would not survive overnight. Again, a curse was spoken over him. He was given a 24-hour death sentence, and Yahweh had other plans. And like I say, he's 90 years old right now and still with us, still does his exercises that he learned in the military. I am so proud of him for that. Friends and relatives. I've known people on both sides, the allopathic and the natural healing. Natural healing was not just for cancer. All my life, I've known people that were not finding help for their issues through the Western medicine, the allopathics, and they turned to natural things. And part of that is emotions. Like I say, the body keeps the score, and our emotions get stuck in our cells, and they had to turn to that for their healing. I've also known, like I have an aunt who is a 2-time cancer survivor, and the last time she was diagnosed was before I was, and so it's been close to 30 years for her, and she did the Western medicine, the chemo and radiation, and absolutely believes that that's what saved her. Her sister, on the other hand, was diagnosed and did the chemo and radiation, but then found out about natural therapies and so went to a natural clinic in another state and was feeling like she was healing, but she ran out of money. And the facility, and this is, like I say, close to 25-30 years ago, the facility promised her that they would help her get insurance to pay for her treatments. But she ran out of money and racked up the credit card bills and just could not pay. And a lot of times those places will tell you that if your bill gets to be so high, we're going to stop treatments until you get the bill down, which is understandable, to an extent. But anyways, so she came back home and went to the allopathics, and they told her that she'd have to be on chemo and radiation for the rest of her life. The rest of her life was only maybe another year. And she was stolen from us. And her one son has really struggled because he was very close to her and she was his rock. And he's really struggled with the loss of his mother. So it's not just the person dealing with it, it's the community. I feel the loss. My family was close to her, even though she wasn't blood related. My family was close to her, and I felt like she was one of my aunts and that her two boys were my cousins. So, let me see here. So, it's not the only ones. My own mother was diagnosed after I was, and she chose to go my route, and I'm thankful that she did. Her dad was diagnosed and had some on his ear. But, let me see here. I can't remember if he was diagnosed after I was or not. But anyways, this idea that it's hereditary. If it's hereditary, then how come I was diagnosed first, then my mom, then her dad, or whichever it was, There's a thing called epigenetics, and if you're not familiar with epigenetics, I encourage you to research it. Epigenetic science. And that talks about the fallacy of everything being genes, which is the big thing right now that Western medicine is pushing. And I'm a radical and I'm a conspiracy theorist because I'm outside the box and because I have done my research. I've been bullied my whole life, like I say, and a lot of it has come from those who call themselves Christians, and some of them are highly respected in Christian circles. I have confronted them, and that's as far as it went because there's been no apologies. My dietary practices are different, but you know what? Just because I eat one way is not what I require any of my clients to do. And that's one of the issues that comes along with a lot of this bullying and with people speaking curses over me, because they think that just because I eat a certain way that I'm going to tell everybody else to eat that way. Like I say, I look at the whole person. And there's a good book called Your Perfect Diet, and I reference it all the time. And I encourage my clients, we work together to figure out what the best diet for them is, not to follow my specific way of eating, because I've seen it. I've seen it over and over again. One size does not fit all. You think about the shoes, and if you've got multiple family members, you line up the shoes, and each person has their own size because one size does not fit all. You ever tried on some of those one size fits all gloves? A lot of times I'm swimming in those gloves, and I'm like, this is crazy. I need my size. And that's what I do with my clients is I work to find out what their perfect diet is and not what somebody else. I've got certifications. I do. But I am eclectic, and I find out exactly what's best for my clients, and I don't have them be cookie cutters and follow my specific way. So I wanted to share that with you. You know, something else that goes along. Tim and I had the honor, the blessing of watching, and I forget what it's called, but anyway, the special screening of the new movie I Can Only Imagine, which is being released this Friday. It's the second I Can Only Imagine, and I am so glad that I went. It touched my heart, and music touches my heart anyway. But knowing why the song, knowing the story behind the song and why the song was written, just really is important. And there's a scene in there that Tim Timmons is the opening act for the Mercy Me band, the Mercy Me group, and they invite Tim Timmons to come along and be their opening act. And he's got a song that he's been working on for quite a while that comes out of the story about the songwriter that lost his wife and daughters in a tragic boat accident. What was it, back in the 1800s or something like that? And actually, he lost his daughters. His wife survived the boat accident. But anyways, so he got on a boat to go and meet up with his wife and be with her. And as the boat was going across the area that his daughters had been lost at, the captain said, "This is where this happened." And he wrote the song, "It Is Well With My Soul." And so Tim Timmons was so stirred with that song, and he was trying to come up with a song to go along with that. And this is where this is where his version of "It Is Well With My Soul" came, and it's the What If song, if you're familiar with the What If song that Mercy Me sings. And during the scene in the movie, Bart Miller, the lead singer for the Mercy Me band, comes walking into the area, the practice area, and Tim Timmons is sitting at the piano working at this song, and he tells Bert, I'm working with this song, but I've hit a roadblock. I have everything but the last verse, and I think that you are the one who's supposed to write that last verse. And Bart gets upset because he's dealing with his own struggle, and he says, "Why me? You can't even understand what I'm going through." And Tim Timmons, it was a mic drop. Tell you what, it was a mic drop. And he turns to Bart and he says, "I've got cancer." just like that. I've got cancer. And it was like ice cold water fell on Bert Millard's face. And he woke up and he realized that maybe we can understand. And that's what I'm trying to say. For those of you who tell me that I can't understand what you're going through, have you really taken time to get to know my story? Everybody's story matters. I care about your story. Have you taken time to really get to know my story? You know, some of the things that I've gone through along this line, years ago when I was in choir, there was a fellow choir member who lost her father, and she was really close to him. And she was really struggling, and we were at an event together, and I noticed that she left the room, and I could tell by her countenance and by her face and by her body language that she was really struggling. I didn't know at the time exactly what she was struggling with, but I could tell that she was struggling with something. So I followed her to the bathroom where she went, and she locked herself in one of the stalls, and I just offered some I don't even remember what I said, but I just offered, can I help you with something? And her response was, there's nothing you can do. And my response was, I can be a friend. I lost my sister when I was 4. She was clueless, but I understood what she was going through. Another fellow choir member, and I were having a conversation, and she had made some comments and saying that there's no one in this room who hasn't gone through what you've gone through. And I walked up to her and said, you know, I have not found anybody that I can talk to who has gone through what I've gone through. And I said, at one point I was suicidal. And yes, I'm admitting it. I have been suicidal through my journey because I didn't have the community to unwrap the grave clothes that I was wearing. Her response to me after I told her that I've been suicidal, her response was, I guess I didn't see your vulnerability. Now, why do you think it was that she didn't see my vulnerability? I know what it was, but I'm going to ask you, what do you think it was why she didn't see my vulnerability? We sat next to each other in choir a lot. We stood next to each other in choir a lot when we were performing. We were on a couple of short-term trips, choir trips together. So you decide, why was it that she didn't see my vulnerability? We recently, in our local area, had a high school student commit suicide in a very public place. High school student committing suicide in a very public place. What comes to your mind about that? what comes to my mind is, and I don't know if it was male or female, they've not released that information out of respect for the family, and I'm fine with that. That's what we should do. We should be respecting each other. Should be respecting each other in those desperate times. And we should be coming alongside and helping to unravel what's going on. But what comes to my mind is, what was this person's story? What was their background? Just like when I work with clients, I don't say do this, do that, do this. I find out their story. Their story matters. In healing, story matters. So I wonder, what was this student's story? Why did they choose to commit suicide in a very public place? And I've learned that a lot of times, like with my journaling during quarantine, some people will call it bleeding. Don't bleed all over me. Some people will call it throwing up. Don't throw up all over me. But a lot of times people are crying for help, and they're crying to be seen. Could this student have been begging for help? Maybe they were begging to be seen. You know, between junior high and high school, I cut my hair to the style that it is now. And I had glasses at the time. And the summer between 11th and 12th grade, I cut my hair and I got rid of the glasses. I got contacts. And I'll tell you what, when I went to school, my first day of 12th grade, one of my fellow students, her mother, who had seen me, didn't know me, but seen me for the last couple of years, asked if there was a new student on campus, and was shocked to know that it was me, because there was that much of a difference. It was like night and day. And the acceptance that I received from my fellow students was like night and day. Where are we at? Are we looking at people just by what we see on the outside? Or are we looking beyond what we can see? Was this high school student begging for somebody to look beyond the outward appearance, to look at their soul, to help them unravel the grave clothes that they were finding themselves in? Like I say, my health coaching, we don't offer formulas, but we do offer companionship. We walk with you through your journey. We're not here to tell you how to fix it. And if you even look at our website, I've got the Medicine Woman's Prayer. And part of that prayer is that I'm not here to fix you. I will not fix you. But I will walk through you in your darkness. Something that I did not have. If it wasn't for Yahweh. And I did have the support of my husband and my daughter, which I'm very grateful for. But I didn't have anybody, a woman specifically, I didn't have a woman to come and sit by me, excuse me, and help me to learn new recipes, help me to learn new habits. I didn't have that. And that's what we do, is we come alongside you. We walk with you. And sit with you in the fog, because I know there's a lot of information coming at us, and especially nowadays, AI will tell you some of what to do. And this YouTube video tells you what to do, and this YouTube video tells you something else to do, and that and this book and this and that, and yeah, we went through a little bit of that. We didn't have AI and we didn't have the internet at that time. So, but we read books, but we still had to sift through it. And so what we offer is the opportunity. It's a fog. We offer the opportunity to help lift that fog and to help you determine what's best for your journey. Sacred undoing. There's a lot of times that we hold sacred because it's what we have been brought up with. And I tell people, I don't know where this came from, but during my first diagnosis, I had the idea that if I didn't do exactly what the doctors, the white coats, said to do, that I could be arrested and put in jail. Now, you may laugh at that, but that was my mindset because of my upbringing, the sacred undoings. The sacred undoing right now is that you have to run to the doctor, you have to run to the hospital, the first little sniffle. How many times, even just in the last 8 weeks, has your family been to the doctor? How much money are you spending on a regular basis to doctor visits? Could some of those be avoided? But it's sacred right now. That's what we've been ingrained with all of our lives. Like I say, it's not a 5-step plan, but it's a place held just for you. We don't hand you easy answers, but we do hold a space for you to go deep and into the deeper questions and find what's going to work best for you. A safe place without judgment and condemnation, and someone who actually sees you. I have a hard time when I go places sometimes because I am 5 foot 1 inch. And a lot of times, even like in a theater or something, I'll find a comfortable place and a 6 foot person will sit right in front of me or will stand right in front of me when I'm at an event. And I've started saying, some people make better doors than windows, because they're not paying attention to their surroundings. They're just focused on where they would be most comfortable. And I've even had people go, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you." Yeah, it's what I've dealt with my whole life. Sometimes I grin and bear it, and sometimes I speak up about it. We offer a safe place. That was why we had the weekly wellness group in our home before we uprooted and moved 8 years ago. A place where people could be safe and they could share their deep feelings and share the deepness of their heart without judgment and without feeling like somebody's trying to fix them. We're there not to rush you. Healing takes time. When we go and just get a magic pill, that's a quick fix. It's a band-aid. True healing takes time. And that's what we're about. Not to rush you, but to sit with you in the mystery. We offer what we've learned. And you know, Tim was diagnosed with degenerative discs in his back and told that he'd just have to deal with it for the rest of his life. He then decided to take on some of what I was doing for my cancer journey and incorporate it into what he needed to do. And it took 18 months. 18 months, but his discs are completely healed. And it's been proven by x-rays, both that he had them and that they're completely healed. And he no longer has the pain that he had at that time. It takes time. Healing takes time. And the deeper the wound, the more time it takes. You don't need someone to fix you. But you do need a safe place to land while you learn to heal. And that's what we offer. We don't just talk about healing, but a space where we learn to honor it. And that's what we want to do. We want to honor you. You're important to us, and your story matters. If you have stayed with me for this whole thing, I truly appreciate it. I know it's not for everyone, but I truly appreciate it that you have stayed for this whole video, for this whole podcast. Share it. We'd love to have you comment. In fact, we're having right now a 100 comment challenge so that we can get this shared with people who may need it, and it helps the algorithms. We don't know what everybody's going through, and we need to be there to encourage each other. So if you know somebody that might need to hear what I've just shared, please share it with them. And we do invite you to make comments. And again, I thank you for sticking with me through this whole video. That is sometimes a hard thing, and I applaud you for doing a hard thing. Have a great day and a great rest of your week. Bye.